No coffee today. Oh, what's that behind your ear? Coffee. Hey, Charles here. On this channel we discuss filmmaking topics and self-improvement as a creator. So if you happen to like content like this, be sure to subscribe and tune in every week for more videos like these. Without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Today we're going to discuss some simple handheld techniques for product B-roll that's going to help your footage stand out, whether you're a filmmaker working on a project or a business owner showing off your products on your website or your social media. So the first movement that we're going to be discussing is just a classic reveal shot. And the reveal shot is sort of like an introduction. It's the establishing shot that lets the viewer know what the focal point of that scene is going to be. To be honest, there's not much more that can be said about that. But with that being said, we're going to discuss 3 different types of reveal shots that you can use to spice up your footage. And the first being the most common type, which is just a reveal shot from behind an obstruction. It just involves placing an obstruction in front of your subject and moving the camera so that the subject comes into view. Very simple, very easy to achieve. I think that one benefit of the technique especially is that it creates an illusion of a larger movement with the obstruction being placed in the foreground. And it's just a really good technique to add a cinematic feel to your sequences, especially when you're doing product B-roll. Now, these next 2 techniques, I don't see a lot of people using it, but again, they're really useful techniques to add a cinematic vibe to your video. Now, these are unofficial names, but I like to call them the focus reveal and the push through obstruction reveal. Now, for the focus reveal, you're going to need a camera that can go into manual focus mode. Essentially, all you have to do is set where you want your subject to come into focus and making sure that the framing is correct, taking 1 or 2 steps back and then pushing the camera into focus and revealing your subject. It's as simple as that. Now, as I keep saying, it's a really useful technique, especially when you don't have an obstruction to create an obstruction reveal. Or let's say you've already created an obstruction reveal and you want to add a bit of variation to your video and, you know, just spice up your videos and make it look a bit better. Now, the next reveal movement that we're going to discuss is the push through obstruction reveal. Like I said, unofficial name. Now, this technique can't be used all the time. There isn't always the opportunity, but if you do have the opportunity, it's a really interesting one to remember. Now, essentially, all you have to do is place something like a plant or grass in front of your subject, or even a curtain, anything with a soft texture, and push through that obstruction to reveal your subject on the other side. I guess you can kind of say it's a combination of the obstruction reveal and the focus reveal, but it's a really useful one to remember when you're trying to spice up your videos and add a cinematic feel to your videos. What? I said we were going to talk about self-improvement as well. What? You didn't think I was clickbaiting with that thumbnail, did you? Eat your fruit and veg. It's good for you. Now, moving away from reveal movements, this next one is called, or I like to call it, the hero shot. Now, if it wasn't obvious in the name, it's kind of named like that because it communicates to the viewer that your subject holds a high level of importance and it makes your subject feel empowered. I mean, just look how a top-down shot creates a different feeling. Now, in my opinion, this shot works best on people, especially with the combination of expression in the face, but it can be used on all types of subjects, especially to give it that heroic feel. Now, if you ask me, this one's kind of the most inventive out of the bunch. It's not common, like I said, it's not used by many, and you can use it to really give your video a really interesting vibe and intrigue the viewer into the sequence that you've made. Now, obviously, it's quite quirky and it has its place, so it won't be used on every type of project, but if you have the opportunity to use this type of shot, it can really add an interesting dynamic to your sequence and kind of produce something that not everyone's going to expect. Now, what would be the point in me discussing all these camera movements with you without giving you any tips on how to achieve them? So here we go. To get these shots shake-free and looking as smooth as possible can be really difficult. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to achieve smooth looking footage handheld. Tip number 1 is going to be always keep at least 2 hands on the camera at all times. The more points of contact you have in your camera, the less camera shake you're going to experience and the smoother your footage is going to be. Tip number 2 is going to be keep your elbows tucked and your arms locked. That way you're more of a unit with your body and there's less opportunity for camera shake through the arms, which are not very stable on their own. So by keeping your elbows tucked and your arms locked, you can keep a steady hold on the camera, creating creating smoother movements and introducing less camera shake overall. Tip number 3 is making rocking kind of pivoting movements instead of steps. When you make steps, you introduce a lot of camera shake because you're kind of more unstable when you're taking steps, as opposed to using your knees and making rocking movements, whether that be forward and back or side to side. It's a lot more stable than taking just steps forward and backwards. So use rocking, maybe pivoting, if you like to call it, pivoting movements when you're making your camera movements. Now the 4th tip is to introduce a camera strap and use a camera strap whilst you're shooting. Remember what I said earlier to always keep 2 hands on your camera at all times. Now when you use a camera strap, you're introducing a 3rd point of contact, which will enable you to get smoother footage because you're introducing less camera shake when you're getting that footage. It's more... What I meant to say is, because you're using a camera strap, you're introducing another point of contact, which means there's less pivoting moments on your camera, which hence means that there's going to be less camera shake and then your footage is going to be smoother. That's what I meant to say. Now this 5th tip, you're gonna have to make sure that you have a camera that can shoot 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. Now I'm not telling you to go and buy, I'm not telling anyone to go and buy a new camera that can shoot 60 or 120 frames per second. But essentially when you shoot in those high frame rates in post-production, when you're editing, you have the ability to slow that footage down, and any camera shake which presents itself within the footage that you have is made less noticeable because you've slowed that footage down. Now if you're shooting on a DSLR or a mirrorless camera and it can't achieve those high frame rates, check your camera on your phone, because these phones are quite useful these days. This phone can shoot up to 120 frames per second. This is the Huawei P20 Pro. It can shoot up to 120 frames per second, and if you have a smartphone in this day and age, it's likely that you have a phone that can shoot in a high frame rate. It can also shoot 4K, but that's for a whole nother video. Number 6. Now tip number 6, assuming you have a DSLR or a mirrorless camera or some sort of digital camera, if your camera has inbuilt body stabilization, make sure it's switched on. And also if your lens has optical stabilization, make sure also that is selected. Now of course not everybody has access to that feature, so I'm not going to float around that for too long. Now, the 7th and final tip is to use digital stabilization in post-production when you're editing. Now I can't vouch for Final Cut Pro or iMovie or whatever you use. I use Premiere Pro, and within Premiere Pro there's a plugin called Warp Stabilizer. Now as you can tell from the name, what it does is stabilizes your footage. Now there's a few catches. It does crop into your image in order to afford you the stabilization, but it can really it can really save your skin when you need just that extra little unit of stabilization. Now it doesn't work all the time, but it does come in handy when it works. So explore that if you have access to it. If you have access to any other type of stabilization, then use it. It's there to be used. It's not cheating. It's all part of the process. Just use the tools that's available to you. And that pretty much wraps up everything that I wanted to say in this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope the points that I made are going to be helpful to you when you're out there shooting your product B-roll. If you're not familiar with me, if you're not familiar with this channel, my name is Charles. I'm a freelance videographer, filmmaker. I've been into filmmaking for about 2 years. I've been freelancing for about a couple months. I decided to open this channel to give back and to help people like you, hopefully, who need advice, people who have been in my situation before, people who are in my situation, or people who are better than me. Maybe I can offer them some advice or a perspective that they've never seen or heard before. So if you like these type of videos, we're discussing filmmaking topics and self-improvement as a creator. So if you like these kind of videos, do consider subscribing and tune in every week for more videos like these. Also hit the like button and share it with anyone you think will gain value from this video also. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments box below, or find my email in my about section of my page and email me any questions that you have. Anyway, that's been all from me. I hope you have an enjoyable week, whatever you're getting up to, and I'll see you next time.